morning, good evening and good afternoon. My name is Rich Clark. I've been a hypnotherapist for the last 8 years and I've been a holistic therapist for the last 15 years. So every Friday I talk about fears and phobias. So to carry on this is a series about the top 100 phobias in the world. And so this one is fear of getting rid of stuff or getting rid of belongings. And this is called Disposophobia. Disposophobia. It's kind of got a nice little alliteration going on there and sort of pun. Anyway, Disposophobia is the fear of losing things or intense fear of getting rid of stuff. It is called hoarding disorder. Many people worldwide are known to be affected by this phobia, and a recent survey has shown that Britons are number 1 in this list. This actual phobia is number 92 in the 100 list. The word disposophobia has Greek origins. The word dispos means getting rid of or personal belongings, and phobias stand for Greek, the god of fear. This mental disorder causes the sufferer to save every small thing acquired, including receipts, old magazines, worn out clothes, newspapers, old mail lists, notes and so forth. The illness has actually been around for centuries, and yet many of the sufferers are unaware of having it. Disposophobia can be further divided into animal hoarding, book hoarding, as well as other specific object hoarding. In the majority of the cases, the phobic does not have any use for the objects they hoard, but this intense fear regarding its disposal causes them to keep collecting and storing those objects. Naturally, the phobic's loved ones are severely affected by this behaviour and are often unable to convince them to get help. So the trouble is with animal hoarding, it leads to very unhygienic conditions and might compromise one's health. Majority of the phobics tend to be socially withdrawn or lonely, which only intensifies their need to hoard most stuff. Now, also we have a lot of issues is that a lot of older people used to buy things because after World War II there was rations, and so people were actually without. So a lot of children who didn't have much, then once they get older, all the things they wanted they buy as adults. This is actually common in a lot of people who are poor. If you're poor and then you get into wealth or you get into a good job, you actually end up hoarding things because there's a lot of things you didn't have as a child, and then you end up hoarding and then having too much stuff. So my issue would have been books years ago, records. One time I had over 2,000 records, and I had at one time 2,000 CDs. Now I'm down to about 50 CDs, and records I'm down to about just under 100. And this is something because as a child, though I had ability, I used to go second-hand boot sales and so forth, I was always wanting things and so forth. So I had this issue, and I'm getting better at it, but there's still things I hoard as well for loads of reasons. But again, I'm trying my best. So the causes of disposophobia is doctors in the field of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, research program at the University of California, Los Angeles, to determine that people with certain neurological conditions and diseases are more likely to turn into hoarders. This includes dementia, ADHD, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, and certain addictions, developmental disabilities, as well as OCD. The study also shows that people with disposophobia are more likely to have a mild atrophy of the brain or unusual frontal lobe shapes. This part of the brain is responsible for making decisions and executing functions. Also, often a past negative experience could trigger the fear of getting rid of stuff. The person might have thrown something out only to have regretted it later. Also, this can be that people have had things stolen which they wanted to keep, and then it means that they then very mistrusting on anybody thinks, and then when they buy it back they then really hold on to it. The fear of getting rid of stuff also begins rather early in one's life, and it's been seen as kids as young as 3 years old. Animal or book hoarding can also have specific triggers in that the person feels more secure by collecting books, keeping pets. This could have a link with a traumatic event or memory. Physically, mentally abused children are more likely to show these signs. So hoarding can also begin in one's middle age. It's seen predominantly in women more than men, which is kind of surprising, but that is actually what's currently has been recorded. Core vulnerabilities like emotional dysregulation, anxiety and depression occurring due to an emotional setback, loss of a loved one or a job or divorce could be the triggers. The phobic starts associating a particular object with human-like qualities and feels intense grief or fear as the thought of throwing that object out. People who have fear of getting rid of stuff also fear that they'll be wasting the object or losing out on the opportunity represented by that object. So, the symptoms of getting rid of stuff. People with disposophobia, I love how that sounds, often have trouble organising things. They display intense anxiety and fear when asked to throw out old and unwanted unnecessary stuff. They might show feelings following signs of anxiety, panic attacks. So 1, they're feeling restless, have elevated heart rate, rapid breathing. 2, they feel like screaming, running away, or hiding rather than throwing away the stuff. 3, feeling extremely distressed, nauseated at the thoughts of getting rid of stuff. And we see this when people, you ask them to clear up the house, they end up looking at something and then they're spending an hour on this one thing instead of actually clearing up their house. I've done house clearances as a job, and it's very hard to get people to actually realise what you should chuck away and what you actually need. It's quite a demanding job and quite challenging. The houses of disposophobics are generally cluttered and there's hardly any living space. Animal hoarders tend to live in extremely unhygienic, unsanitary conditions. The living spaces are often home to bacteria, rotting food, vermin, rodents, and even biohazard waste. They typically live alone and show signs of depression or OCD. And obsessive compulsive disorder, people think it's all about cleaning, but actually can mean they collect things as well. So it's very much the OCD thing, which I'm going to talk about in another post soon. It's quite important. The hoarded items are often stacked in passages and hallways and often moved to create space for more items. If there's no clutter, the phobics tend to feel restless and feel they need to get more stuff. Needless to say, disposophobia can deeply affect relationships and can drive away loved ones. Holding a job or steady relationships can also become rather difficult for people suffering from this phobia. So how do people overcome this phobia? Well, the fear of getting rid of stuff is a complex disorder, and it's vital to diagnose the underlying conditions before prescribing fear therapy or medication. And because most of this is actually done in the subconscious, so there's a subconscious mindset of why they want to collect. In general, compulsive hoarding and disposophobia has been treated and managed using anti-obsessive medication, as well as CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy. The latter specifically targets the characteristics of the phobia and gets to the root of the fear which the phobic possesses, right? But again, this is exactly what we do in hypnotherapy. CBT is just using the idea of hypnotherapy. It's exactly what you should do in hypnotherapy. Get to the root cause. Mild disposophobia can also be treated through talk therapy and other psychiatric interventions. It is vital to get professional cleaning services to help the phobic start a healthier and cleaner lifestyle. Additionally, one must pick up the threads of one's life and try and rebuild bonds of trust with friends and family. The latter should also be patient, understanding about the phobic's condition and try to change the person with love and patience. Disposophobia is a treatable condition, but taking these pivotal steps along with meditation and medication, positive visualization, other self-therapies in the phobic can set out on the road to recovery. And also, just another thing is also, I understand about this idea of getting rid of stuff, because my mum, dad and me inherited a house from an uncle who actually had a problem, and actually how he'd done it, he had his front room stored as 60s belongings, 70s in the back room, 80s in the hallway, 50s in this, and then he also had the bathroom was in the 60s, and he couldn't move the house. He lived in basically a tip, and we had to clear this up as a house, and this was in the mid-90s. So I've seen it myself, how it can get really bad, and he had a breakdown. He had a breakdown after his mother, which would be my great-grandmother, died, and he looked after her. He was the youngest child. And this is something where you see this a lot with people when they have breakdowns, is when they collect things or they get obsessive. Now, also with addictions so people think addictions, but it's actually getting rid of stuff. So people they collect things, books, whatever it is they can't have. And people think that when people collect clothes or they collect too many belongings, it can be that. But everybody has some form of addiction or something addictive in their personality. Some people it's with food, some people it's with drugs, with drink, and so forth. So again, we should have compassion and compromise and understanding what these things are. So hopefully that will give you a bit of a clue and some ideas of why this happens. And then maybe also you have to look at the Marie Kondo effect of how she says about if you've had things in a drawer after 2-3 years, if you haven't used them, get rid of them, and so forth. And also there are people called removing clutter, clearing clutter. I can put you in touch with them if you need that help in the UK and also in America. So anyway, until next time, speak to you soon. Goodbye.